It is the most contagious disease on the planet, and today we're dealing with an outbreak right here in America. Sharing more on what we need to know about measles is Dr. Michael Sweat, professor and director of MUSC's Division of Global and Community Health. We're glad you could join us.
My pleasure.
And it's hitting close to home, with Georgia being the closest state where we're starting to see some numbers popping up. But I thought this disease was eradicated in the U.S. about 25 years ago. Why is it making a resurgence?
Yeah, the primary reason it's making a resurgence is low vaccination rates. Measles is the most contagious infectious disease known to man, and you have to have very high levels of vaccination to stop spread in communities. If it drops below 95%, you begin to see spread. And there's been a lot of resistance to vaccines, particularly since COVID over the years. And the rates of vaccination have dropped in a lot of areas, including here in South Carolina. And it's getting down below 95%. So we're beginning to see outbreaks in different communities.
Wow. And I want to talk about the vaccinations in a moment here, but maybe you could tell us, what is measles? Where does it come from? And where did this latest bout of measles originate from?
Yeah, measles is a viral illness, and it spreads very much like the common cold, except that, again, that it's much more contagious. When people get measles, they begin having symptoms like you would with a common cold, except often with very high fevers, up above 104 often. And then within several days of symptom onset, people will develop small spots, typically first in the mouth, and then that'll start to spread to other parts of the body, often with the increase in the fever. And after a couple of weeks, people tend to recover, but not everybody. A lot of people, about 1 in 20 who get measles will go on to develop pneumonia, which is the largest cause of death from measles. And about 1 in 1,000 will get brain swelling, encephalitis, which can lead to deafness and brain damage. In fact, it used to be the most common cause of deafness in the United States. And about 1 to 2 per 1,000 will die from measles. And one additional thing, once people have a case of measles, it has this effect on the immune system to weaken the immune system. They refer to it as immune amnesia. And for anywhere from months to years, people then become much more susceptible to other infectious diseases.
And from what I understand is by getting the vaccination, you are almost 100% immune from getting the disease if you should come in contact with it. Is that correct?
That is correct. Using the current vaccines with the current recommendations for 2 doses, it's about 97% effective. So it's really a super effective vaccine. And I would just add, it's got very rare side effects. The one side effect that does come up is it only occurs about 1 per million people, and that's really an allergic reaction to the vaccine. So it's extremely rare to have side effects. If you don't mind, one thing I would add is there's been some misinformation about a belief that the measles vaccine will cause autism. And that was really based on a study done some time ago that got published that was found to be using false data. And there's been multiple large studies with over 1.2 million people that have shown no association between measles and autism. So that particular bit of misinformation has gotten out there and has led to a lot of people to avoid vaccinating their children.
I see. And that's when you should get vaccinated, typically is when you're a child. Is that right? Can you get vaccinated as an adult?
Yes, you can get vaccinated as an adult. The normal recommendation is about 1 year of birth. After birth, you give the first dose, and then another dose comes later. For adults, normally people born before 1957, it's assumed, because like everybody got the measles before that time, so there's really not much need for a vaccination if you were born before 1957. If you're born between 1957 and 1989, there may be a need for a booster because of the type of vaccines sort of changed over time, and it was found that some of those vaccinations were not as effective. So normally an adult would not need one. If you're unsure, I'd probably talk to your healthcare provider. There's a blood test that can be done to tell whether you have immunity to measles as well.
Oh, that's a good piece of information to have. And who would not be a viable candidate to receive the vaccination, at least not at this moment?
Well, really, I don't think there's any limits on who could get the vaccination. I think if you had a history of allergy to it, which would be very rare, otherwise there's no real limit. Right now,
Pregnant? What if you're pregnant?
right, if you're pregnant, and it is a risk for pregnancy, so being vaccinated prior to becoming pregnant is very valuable because it can lead to, if you have a case of measles, it can lead to early birth and miscarriage as well.
I see. Okay. Well, some very good information. Dr. Sweat, thank you again for joining us. Really good information.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
We're back in 2 minutes.